as I started sharing, there was like this visceral release when people were just commenting and sending me messages and reading the story. And there was like this ripple effect that felt really powerful. And by reading my story, people were finding the courage to actually look at theirs and write theirs. And that was a kind of resonance that I'm like, oh, this is what publishing is about. This is why this matters. This is so important.
Welcome to The Whole Writer, a place where we talk about what it means to show up as a writer. Not just a better writer or a more productive writer or a published writer, but a whole one. Someone who's grounded in their voice, in their community, in their creative path, even when the world tells them to hustle, compare, or conform. I'm Nicole Meier, a multi-published author and book coach who believes that nurturing the person behind the page is just as important as refining the words on it. Each week, we'll explore the terrain of writing life with honesty, warmth, and practical wisdom, creating space for you to write from a place of wholeness rather than depletion. Whether you're drafting your first manuscript or publishing your fifth book, you'll find conversation and companionship for the journey here. So, settle in, bring your questions and your curiosity, and let's discover what it means to write and live with authenticity and purpose. Hello, listeners. Today is very special because I am very excited to have this guest on today, Jessy Easton. I have been low-key stalking her on Substack because I'm so incredibly inspired by her voice, her mission, and just her warmth that she brings so many writers in. Before we talk to Jessy and dive deep into all things, I want to read just a quick blurb about her. So Jessy grew up in the Mojave Desert in a meth lab on the edge of nowhere, and writing saved her life. Her essays have been published in The Rumpus, Good River Review, and more. Her memoir, The One Who Leaves, is being serialized right now on Substack. Welcome, Jessy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's funny when people when I hear growing up in a meth lab, I'm like, yeah, that does sound like a lot.
Well, it doesn't define you, but it certainly makes for a rich memoir, right?
Right, exactly. I think it just set the trajectory for now.
Right. I want to get into all of that because one of the reasons I'm so inspired by you is that you really decided to take your own writing trajectory, if you will, into your own hands. And this is something that feels brave and true, but also very forward-thinking. So let's kind of wind it back for people who are just getting to know you. You have said in your bio that I just read just now that writing saved your life after, of course, growing up in a meth lab in the desert. So could you maybe take us back to that moment when you first discovered writing as your lifeline? What did those early words on the page give you that nothing else could?
Yeah, I think for me, I didn't even really call it writing. I didn't even realize that's what I was doing, right? It was more like I was journaling. It was in elementary school, and it was just a way I was kind of journaling like I was writing to somebody. It was almost like a prayer. And my parents weren't religious or anything like that, but it was like I was trying to commune with something or communicate with something that was bigger than myself, and probably just looking for someone that I could count on since I didn't have that. And I just didn't have that at home. And I think that the page became that for me. It always was there, always showed up, and it was always dependable, and it was safe. And that built-in safety was just so special for me. And I still, to this day, have such a powerful journaling practice.
I love that. I want to stay on that for a minute because I've never heard someone talk about journaling as kind of a prayer. And to me, that just made me feel something right in my chest because who doesn't need something that is a version of that feels safe, that feels consistent, that feels like they can put their truth on the page? And I love that you didn't even think of it as writing back then. Can you talk about, is this something you now do every morning? Is this something that you feel like you've put your own sort of spin on how to journal? Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, I do it every single morning. I don't have a set number of pages necessarily, but I try to do it before my son wakes up, before I do anything else, right out of bed kind of thing. just to see what's there. I call it like a clearing, and it just clears out whatever is in my space that maybe needs to be let go. I mean, sometimes it's not negative things, sometimes it's just gratitude, like really centering in on what is feeling good for me right now. Sometimes I have prompts that I kind of make up. I love journaling prompts. And obviously, when I was a kid, that was not how I journaled. But now I find myself gravitating more towards some kind of structure in that way of what I'm writing toward. But a lot of times, writing for me is not about finding the answers. It's about just opening up more questions, seeing what's there underneath, keep going. What are the layers? What are the layers? And then also when I'm working on a project, that kind of journaling will also be really powerful for me because I can get that clearing out. And then when I actually come to the page to write the thing I want to write, I'm ready and I'm kind of primed to do that.
Yeah, I love it. I call it warming up the creative muscle. But you remind me of my friend Tracy Lang. She's also an author, and she talks about her process as posing questions for herself every morning. And that sort of reminded me of what you were saying of what questions do these prompts bring up? What kinds of things do you want to look at? And to me, that's a really honest way of staying true to what's happening right now in your creative process, as opposed to coming with a plan and making sure you answer specific questions you put out the night before. Because some people actually do that. And you say you're looking for structure, but to me, it sounds like a nice blend of fluidity while you're journaling.
Yeah, I think what it is the bridge to the structure. Because when I'm working on a project, there usually, I struggle with structure. I had no structure growing up. So that is not something that's built in me. And so, yeah, I think when I'm going into a project, I'm like, okay, like, what am I doing? What's the why here? And so that journaling is that bridge to get me there. But yeah, it's really powerful.
Okay, so we talked about how writing sort of helped you in the early days. When did you actually start writing essays and think about writing a memoir? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it wasn't until so much later. So much later. I was on a whole different journey because I grew up in the Mojave, so I was in California. So as soon as I could, I escaped that place and went to LA. And then I worked there as much as I could, got in the mix of things. And then I became a publicist at Atlantic Records. And so I was on this track for music and the music business. Music was like my first love. I didn't even realize writing was a thing or an option. And then I met my husband, who is a musician. We met on tour, and he had been one of the first people, or probably the first person, that I had ever told about my life, like my past. Everyone else, I don't like to say I lied, but I admitted the truth, where I came from and just how things looked. I just didn't feel safe talking about it. And I was trying to not just protect myself, but protect my parents. I didn't want anyone to see them in a negative light. But my husband, we had this bond. I mean, we've been together for 14 years now. So I had told him, and he's like, wow, this is wild. He's like, you should write about it. He's an artist, like medium artist. And so I'm like, okay, sure. But I didn't really know how to even access my past because I had kind of hidden from it for so long. And so I kind of avoided the whole concept of that for like another 4 years. And then yeah, I just finally started getting into it and just following I was like 29, 30, and I'm 39 now. So I've only been really writing in that capacity for about 10 years. And yeah, I just like started whatever memories had the most emotional heat for me is what I just stream of conscious just started getting down. And it was never to publish. That was not even in my realm at all. I don't think I would have written a single word if that was ever something that I thought I could do. I think just as a journaler, just processing my life in that way, it built in that safety for me. And so I could easily pour my heart out on the page and that felt safe. So I always had the goal that I would be keeping it private. But then once I had gotten some people, friends or whoever, to start reading pieces and they were like, wow, you should try to get this published. And of course, my husband's in my ear the whole time, like being a cheerleader. So I'm like, okay, yeah, like let's just see what happens. And so then I started going down that road. And as I was writing the memoir, I started trying to get into literary journals and publishing essays that way. Felt like a nice little step.
Okay, this is really great. So you talked about the emotional heat. And you talked about not having the intention or the motivation to be published, which is why I think your writing, actually, I know because I'm one of your readers, why it resonates with people is because you don't write as if someone is looking over your shoulder. And that's actually a very hard thing to do. So you were allowing yourself to be emotional, you were allowing yourself to be true, but you were also writing from the only place you knew, which was, this is my experience. I'm not filtering it for any sort of publisher or editor who's expecting pages.
Yeah, and I think I might say this on my Substack somewhere, but like I really do write as if I'm writing into a black hole or writing, like I said, like a prayer, like to the universe or whatever, into the ether, as if no one will read it. And then when I go to publish it, I just try to honor that same feeling and not let whatever those things that can come up, fears or imposter syndrome or whatever else. Because at the end of the day, it's the truth. It's my story. People don't have to like it.
Right. Okay. So let's stay on that thread. Your work does focus on the things we're maybe not supposed to talk about. Maybe it's taboo. It's parts of our stories that are uncomfortable. So as a memoir writer, how do you even navigate that tension between protecting yourself and protecting loved ones? Because I know there is an element of that while still telling the whole truth. And I know that there are writers out there maybe taking notes right now because it's really hard for people to do.
Yeah, like I said, I don't think the fear quite showed up right away for me, but it definitely showed up in the sense of my parents. I was just so afraid to hurt them because I love them. And they had already carried so much guilt for my growing up and everything, and I just didn't really want to make it worse. But as I started sharing, there was like this visceral release when people were just commenting and sending me messages and reading the story. And there was like this ripple effect that felt really powerful. And by reading my story, people were finding the courage to actually look at theirs and write theirs. And that was a kind of resonance that I'm like, oh, this is what publishing is about. This is why this matters. This is so important. Just like casting that net out for people. And one of my biggest things was that I really wanted people to see that like love could exist in the kind of chaos that I grew up in, and that like love doesn't just come in like a little tidy box. It can take on many forms. And the journey for me has been actually accepting that two things can be true at once, essentially. Like love can show up in dark places and cannot be enough. That's what it was. So people really started to connect with that concept. And yeah, I just never really wanted to write my parents as villains because I just didn't see them as that. So I think the tension for me was really around what would they say? What would they think? So when I started writing the book, I told my family I was doing it. I told everybody and I interviewed them. My parents and my brother, my uncle, my aunt, my grandparents, like everyone that would sit down with me, I just asked them questions about our life. Not in like a really sterile way, but I did have a tape recorder or whatever, like a little digital recorder. And we just talked and we told stories and we laughed and we cried and it was great. So afterwards, I transcribed them all. And there were stories that were told over and over again. And most of those stories made it into the memoir because it was like this collective thread that I felt really kind of beat through our family. And then there was a few stories that after people were like, oh, can we keep that private? And I honored that because they had already given me so much. And on top of that, I feel like they weren't integral to like the crux of the story anyways. But yeah, I think that my parents, through interviewing them, it helped me understand where they were coming from and then helped them understand what I was doing. And they could see that I wasn't trying to necessarily throw them under the bus, but they could also see that they messed up. But I think this is like, I don't know, my parents have supported me from the beginning. And my mom was one of my first readers and she read my whole manuscript. I gave it to her in like a box. And on the last page, she wrote, I'm so proud of you. And, I couldn't, I couldn't have dreamt that, right? It's just, I feel so lucky. And I understand that like that experience is so rare. And I don't think most people's families would be cool with them writing about them. But at the end of the day, it's your story. It's your experience. It's your truth. So you have to be authentic to you. And I think there is ways to do it in a way that's not necessarily hurting them if you can. And all that to say too, like I still got some people and like messages from readers who had stuff to say about it. Like even to this day, like that I'm exploiting my family or like, especially my mom, or that I'm self-absorbed or whatever people are on about. But the judgy things that people say are often more about them than you. So you can't really let others' voices and opinions into your writing and like your story and your truth, or it's like, well, we'll always be silenced, right?
Right. Okay, so that is so surprising to me that I guess it's not surprising, it's the world, but it's surprising to me that you get pushback because when I read your work and when so many other people read your work, there is a story message, if you will, of love. And I can only imagine that you must have interviewed your family with that same sort of energy of love. Otherwise, they would have brought the wall up and shut down and not answer. And I know you can't speak for your family members, but I'm wondering, did you get a sense that this interview process, this deep dive into everybody's backstory, did you get a sense that it was healing them too, to be able to talk about it?
I think so. That's such a great question. And I also want to thank you for just naming and acknowledging the love that's coming through on the page in the memoir, because that was important to me to keep love at the center, just because that was my truth. But yeah, I think it did. I think my mom, she wanted to see me see her. And so I think that she was able to see herself through my words, my eyes, my perspective. I think that was helpful. My dad was a little bit trickier because it just seems like he carries like more active guilt. I don't know if my mom's just better at disassociating or something, but
Right.
my dad is like, for a long time, he was just like, nah, we don't need to go. He didn't even want to touch it. But over time, and I created that safety for us. And like you said, that he realized I was coming with love.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just to be like, yeah, let's talk about it, you know?
Right.
I remember when I asked him about the meth lab, like how he learned how to cook meth and how that all came about and like what was going on there. Cause I was like 6 to 8 or something. And he was like, what do you want? Like, you want to learn how to make meth? Like, what are you asking me? Like, he just didn't want to. And I'm like, no, I don't need like a recipe. I just want to know, like, how did we go from like A to B? Like, what was going on there, you know? So it takes a lot of patience. And I was really lucky to be able to have that time to be able to actually talk with my parents. And not everybody has that. Not all their parents are not, maybe not even be alive, but are not open to even discussing. And so that took time.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I want to circle back to some of the things we talked about reader responses. But before we get there, can you share with the audience the decision you made? I don't even know if it's a chicken or egg, which came first, of to get on Substack and then to serialize your memoir as opposed to being in the query trenches like we all have been. And it's a really hard process. Can you kind of talk about that?
Um, well, it was the last straw, really. I wish I could say that, oh, this was what I wanted from the beginning and this was the choice I made and I was very empowered in that choice and it was so great. No, I had gone through like almost 5 years of querying agents and I had gotten nearly 100 rejections on it. And it was a whole long process. I have so many agents in my corner to this day who love the book and who love the story, but it always goes back to it's not the right time. They can't sell it. Like it's not going to work in like where we are in the world. And so I don't really fully look at it as a loss because like I said, I have these connections with these amazing agents who are always inspiring me and hopefully I will write the next book and maybe that will be the thing.
Yeah.
Well, just the timing wasn't right. I started clearing March of 2020. So right when the pandemic hit. That was just happened to be when the book was done. I didn't know how this was all going to go down. It's just the luck of the draw, and that happens sometimes. And obviously, I had to move through a lot of self-doubt around rejection, like my story doesn't matter and I didn't feel valued. and all these things. But as I built relationships with the agents, that really wasn't what it was. And I had a few people who had said, well, maybe if you fictionalize it, we could find a spot for it, just because memoir is so much harder to sell. There's like literally less shelf space. There's all these like, things. So I just didn't want to do that. I could have, but I didn't want to. I had worked so hard on it being true. And I kind of was like done with the project. I didn't want to have to revisit everything again. I'd already worked for it to be what it was. So instead of it just sitting there doing nothing, that is when I decided to put it on Substack. And the serialization just seemed like a really fun way to do it and to connect with readers. And I think my big thing too is why I wanted to publish it was you don't really get into book publishing for the money. For me, I was getting into it for the connections. I want to connect with more people. And I figured a traditional publisher would be able to cast a wider net. So with Substack, I was like, oh, I can like be one-on-one with my own readers. Like that is so special. I can't believe this is like a thing. And so that's kind of how that came about and why I wanted to go that route.
Yeah, I'm so happy you're sharing this because that is why we write. We write to connect, full stop. And if someone else is looking for external validation, which many of us are, it's not going to give you the same sense of fulfillment as hearing back from a reader who said, I feel the same way. This happened to me too, or tell me more because I am so engrossed in your story. And honestly, Jessy, I will tell you, I mean, I've been gushing about you a lot on this podcast, but when I read your why, you wrote a certain Substack post before you start serializing saying why you were choosing to do this. I didn't know you. I hadn't read your writing. I didn't know what level of storytelling you were bringing to the table, but I immediately pressed that subscribe and pay button. And I just said, I'm in, because I would have purchased a book at a bookstore for the exact same price. And I felt like this to me feels so brave and so right now that I was in. Like, you didn't need to sell me on anything. I just was so invested already because you were so endearing and inviting with your message. And I think a lot of people, I mean, I didn't look at your follower count, but you have a lot of followers who feel pretty much the same way I do. So kudos to you for that.
Thank you. It's like,
I know it's hard to get
it's so
confidence.
hard to like, I'm trying to increase my capacity to hold compliments. Yeah, thank you. Especially after so many years of rejection. I'm like, oh, it is good, right?
Yeah. And once I got into it, I am a developmental editor by trade. So I can tell you, I would have never invited you to come onto this podcast if I was like, I don't know, her writing's not that great. Your writing's beautiful. It's stunning. And your storytelling is up to par. So yes, yay for you. But I'm also thinking about the listener in the back of my mind thinking, okay, not all the listeners understand what serializing is. They don't understand Substack. So can you share exactly how you do it?
Yeah, sure. So Substack, so I have it set up. So every week there is a chapter that goes out to my paid subscribers. And I went back and forth on whether or not it goes out to my free subscribers or just my paid. And I settled on paid because I did work really hard on it. And I did end up getting professional editors. I got to work with one of the editors who worked on The Glass Castle, which was such a dream of mine because I'm obsessed with that book.
Incredible.
And so I'm like, this is my work. So I was like, this is great. So I did the paid tier and I made it the price of a book, essentially, because I wanted it to be accessible to people. So they can subscribe and pay $5 a month if they want and just like feel it out, see if it's their vibe. Or they can pay $20 for the year and then they get the whole book. And like all of the chapters up to this point, we're about halfway through, are all there on Substack and you can read them at your leisure. And then the next ones, every week, a new one comes out. And so it will take over the course of a year. And then I also have audio to each chapter. So I read each chapter and add that in for people. It's so funny because I'm not an audiobook person. I love language and I need to sit with the words and the flow of the sentence at my own pace. Like I will just stare at the same sentence for like way too long because it's just so beautiful or I'm just taking it in. But if I do see that an author reads their own work, I'm like, I got to listen to the audiobook too.
Yes.
So I just like to have that as an offer.
Yeah. And some people really do better listening to audiobooks. So that's amazing. So incredible.
Yeah. And it's fun because my husband does the editing of it. And so he puts he adds like he does instrumental music and, well, he does all kinds of music, but one of his is instrumental music. He created for one Christmas, a little side note, but it's so cute. So for the Christmas that I was working on the memoir, he created a whole album of instrumental songs that I could write to so that I could push up the memoir to. And each song was inspired by and named after favorite lines that I had underlined in my favorite books. And it was just such a beautiful, and I write to that album every single day. So he took one of the songs from that and is a bookend at the end of each little chapter that I read. And I just love it. I love to be able to collaborate with him. And his music has been such a big player in me writing it because it's such a big inspiration. I write to it.
That is incredible and incredibly touching. I mean, honestly, it is so important to have a partner who gets it, but to go a step beyond that, the music aspect of it makes it even more intimate and special. Oh, I love that so much. Yeah.
Yeah, no, he really sees me.
Let's talk about the reader response. We talked about some of the not so great responses, but I'm sure that completely is small and compared to the big reader responses. Can you share what it's been like for other people to mirror back to you your work, their responses? What has that been like?
It's been surreal. After having just the memoir just sitting in a box essentially for 5 years, I never knew if it would ever see the light of day. And now that it's actually out in the world, it's resonating with people. And it really is just validating that, like, yeah, this happened and this story matters. And people are really getting it. And I think one of the biggest things for me is that it's not just that they're like, oh, me too, or I feel less alone because I'm reading this story. It's also they are processing their own stories and their own past and all of this hard stuff through reading my story. That just blows my mind. Like, I didn't even think that that was a possible thing. And it's like, of course it is, because that's how I've done it as well. I read memoirs and it helps me get to the center of mine and it kind of builds my courage. And it's just beautiful to be able to be that for someone. And then to be able to actually speak to them and connect with them on that level is even greater. I started getting messages from people who were talking about how hard it is to actually write these stories and access these parts of themselves and these parts of their past. And so I went back into like, well, what were the tools that I really still use, and especially used when I was beginning? And I call it the Fear to Flow framework. And it's kind of like this body-based somatic framework that you go through to help you move through the fear as you're writing into your hard stories without totally losing yourself in the process, which I did in the beginning. Like, my nervous system was just totally flooded all the time. And I didn't have the tools at first, but I, over time, had gained them. And so I kind of gave that as a thing. And then I also, a lot of as the stuff that you've read is around writing the hard thing. I host a weekly, just like a writing prompt, like a grounding and writing prompt thing that we do every week to just get people to at least touch their story in a time, in like a short container, and in a way where their body still feels safe as they do it.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so the Fear to Flow techniques and your prompts and having people show up, this is for people who subscribe to you on Substack, and you've developed a community of sorts. Is that correct?
Yeah, most of that stuff is free. But right now, for my paid is just the memoir. I'm in this place where it's just, community is so important to me. We're all in this together. Like, I know the book is done and it's going out in the world, but I've been in the same exact place as people are right now. And I will be again because I'm going to write another book. There's always things happening. When I went through my birth trauma, I was like, oh, I'm at the beginning of this again. It was a different story, but the feelings were the same. So it's a collective experience.
I love it, Jessy. It's amazing. And I was going to ask you if this has taken you any unexpected places, but I'm going to guess that all of these new community members and people sharing and working together and creating probably feels like an unexpected gift.
Oh, absolutely. It's the connections for me. Writing can be such an isolating and solitary thing. And I kind of love that about it. And there's times when it needs to be that. But then when you get to the other side, it just feels so good to be heard and just witnessed. It feels so good. And to be able to do that for others.
Yeah, amazing. Well, while we're talking about all of these incredible offerings that you have for people, can you share where they can find you, how they can follow along? Because I think some people are probably not only going to want to follow along, but join in some community offerings that you have.
Yeah, mainly on my Substack. So it's just Jessy Easton on substack.com/Jessy Easton. And my Substack is called Afterwards.
Love it.
I'm also on Instagram.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing everything. This was incredible. And I'm such a fan, Jessy. And I know so many others who are listening or reading your work are fans as well. So please keep up the good work. And we can't wait to see what comes from you next.
Thank you so much, Nicole.
Thank you. Okay, listeners, thanks for joining The Whole Writer, and we'll see you next time. If you want to check out my coaching programs for fiction writers, visit NicoleMeier.com. That's MEIER. And if you like this episode, I'd love you to take a minute to leave a rating and review for this podcast. This will help more writers like you to discover the show and to get going on their writing journey. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, happy writing, everyone.